welcome. Nice to see those of you who have your cameras turned on. Those of you who don't have your cameras turned on, it's nice to imagine that you're here. So I've been thinking about myth since I'm doing this workshop series, The Mythical Self. If you haven't signed up, I don't know why you haven't. Maybe because you don't know about it. I haven't actually set up a page on my website for it yet, but I should do that. And I will do that soon. And when I do it, I'll put it up at joeylott.com/myth. Usually the best way to learn about these things is just to be on my mailing list. And so if you're not on my mailing list, you might want to consider doing that. You can sign up there on, just go to my website, joeylott.com, and there's a banner up at the top that lets you sign up. So as I said, I've been thinking about myth and story, and the premise of the workshop. Ruth says she can't hear anything. Nobody else is looking confused. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Yeah, got some thumbs up. Sorry, Ruth. So I've been thinking about these things because the premise is that well, first of all, that wholeness is inclusive of everything, which should be obvious, but for some reason that gets overlooked oftentimes because we imagine that wholeness is going to be found somewhere else, that this right now couldn't possibly be wholeness, because this seems, we have a story that says this is not it, this is not wholeness. And then we're seeking for wholeness somewhere else. And then we have these experiences. And then we mistake the experiences that we think are wholeness for wholeness. And then we overlook the fact that that's just another idea. So we're just spinning around in concept rather than actually immersing ourselves consciously in wholeness as it is. It's all wholeness, but we're either recognizing that or we're not. And so because I've noticed both in myself and in others this tendency to sometimes reject the story of our lives, reject our lives, try to withdraw into some kind of imaginary wholeness that is separate from the story of our lives, because our lives consist of a lot of experiences that are challenging, unpleasant, difficult. And so because we think that wholeness is going to be the absence of those things, we can withdraw or attempt to withdraw into some kind of imaginary wholeness. But it's not actually, that's actually a gain, and it's not helpful, and it perpetuates suffering. That's what I find. So I've been looking at how is it that we can consciously show up in the stories of our lives without rejecting the stories of our lives? How is it that we can consciously include, invite, and welcome the stories of our lives rather than seeing them as the enemy that we have to get rid of? And I'm not a genius. I don't, so I'm not gonna, I can't take credit for it. I mean, the map has been presented to us. It's brilliant. It shows up in myth. And one thing that's really been fascinating to me that I've seen is, it's seen in myself, is still this tendency to want to divide things up into, okay, this over here is just absolute superstitious nonsense, and this over here is is wholeness. This is good, authentic, real, spiritual truth. And it's just interesting to me that tendency to want to do that. So then to want to say, well, for example, myth is just some kind of entertainment, and anybody who sees any value in that, they're just deluded. Actually, that doesn't make any sense at all. And so in taking a look at myth, what I've realized is it really gives us all of the reminders to see our lives and include our lives in the stories of our lives. So one of the things in presenting this workshop, it's a 3-part workshop, and did the first one live this previous Saturday, and that itself is follows the hero's journey. Okay, so there's for me the experience itself, and so as soon as I stepped into it, then everything opened up, and I realized, oh wow, I hadn't realized what I was getting myself into, but it just sort of started to blossom, and it's very exciting. So then I realized that the major arcana of the tarot is this symbolic representation of the hero's journey that is rich with all of this information that can reflect to us how it is that every aspect of our lives is included. And the card 0 in the major arcana is the Fool. And the Fool is card, so there are 21 cards in the major arcana, and then there's the Fool. And the Fool, sometimes people place at the beginning, sometimes people place at the end, but really the Fool is card 0. It's inclusive. It's like the cosmic egg in which everything is born. And so so I was looking at this recently and really just considering it. And so the Fool is outside of the story in some respects. The Fool is that within us which is not actually bound by the story, but that is also a participant in the story. So again, really inviting us to take a look at how it is that it's both. It's not one or the other. We are both not of the story and in the story. So we don't need to try and separate ourselves from the story. The story is actually happening within us and inviting us to discover our own depths and riches. So the Fool is not bound by the story, not bound by the context of the story, not bound by the rules and the structure of the story. So we all have our story. We all have lots of stories, but we have a story about, this is who I am. These are the circumstances of my life. This is just how things are. This is what's happening. This is what's going to happen. This is what did happen. This is what it all means. That's the context of our story. But the Fool is that which is not actually bound by that. And so it's actually amoral. The Fool is not, it's not immoral. It's not rejecting morality, but it's not bound by the morality of our story, the rules of our story. So the Fool is that which can actually inject newness. And most of the time, we overlook this. But through various means, I'm a proponent of self-inquiry, direct inquiry, we can discover that actually this is true. This is actually true in our own experience. So we can just look in our own experience right now and notice that there are all of these, there's this whole context of our life. There's all these rules of our life, all the boundaries of our life, what we can and cannot do, what is allowed and what's not allowed. And in our direct experience right now, if we just notice, not by giving our attention to the thoughts, because the thoughts just sort of loop around and are self-reinforcing. But if we just let that be for a moment, we can just notice in direct experience that we are not bound by any of that. We are actually completely free, completely innocent, completely naive. This is the most intimate, direct experience of ourselves. So then the fool is free to initiate the manifest expression of our authentic desire. So if there's an authentic desire, whatever that, however we give voice to that, but that authentic desire is an authentic desire that arises from this unmanifest. The authentic desire, when it meets up with the context of the story, then that's where there's this, it's met with resistance, because the context of the story has all these rules that say, no, it's not possible, you can't, you shouldn't, it's wrong, it's bad, all the reasons why not. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I have an authentic desire for love. The context of the story that's an authentic desire. I'd say authentic for everybody. Everybody has this authentic desire for love. Why? Because that's arising from the direct connection with love. There's a recognition of love that is true. Then it comes into the story and it's met with resistance because love, in its pure, unmanifest, whatever we call that, in pure unmanifest love, doesn't fit with the rules of the story. The rules of the story then say, oh, no, wait a second. You can't, you shouldn't, not possible, for all these reasons. Well, because you're not good enough, because other people aren't good enough, because it never works out, because it's not possible anyway, all the reasons why not. All based upon the present conditioning within the context of the story. But the fool doesn't know anything about that. The fool is the fool. The fool is just love. So this is manifests in, or we see this in myth sometimes as the trickster. So I was thinking one of the stories that came to mind is I kind of like Norse mythology. Recently become familiar with it because a couple of years ago, my kids got a Norse mythology book from the library. I think I'm going to get the name wrong. It's like Dilater or something like that is the illustrator, and they're very, very nice. And the same illustrator also did a Greek mythology book that we got, but I didn't like that one nearly as much as the Norse mythology book. And so in Norse mythology, there's the gods, or the Aesir, and that sort of the head of them all is Odin. And Odin, so the Aesir if you don't really, it's all a bit complicated to explain how they came about. But here they are, and there are these other beings who are they're sort of more or less they're kind of the enemies of the Aesir. But Odin really liked one of these other beings from I forget what they're called now, but named Loki, who was very beautiful, unlike the rest of them who were kind of grotesque. And so Odin said, Loki, let's become brothers, and you can become one of the gods. And Loki said, yeah, sounds great. I like that idea. So they mixed their blood, and they took this oath, and they became brothers, and Loki became one of the gods. But Loki is Loki's a trickster. Loki's never he never plays by the rules of the gods. Gods have their rules, and Loki's always doing something else. So one of the stories that came to mind is a story where Thor. So Thor is the god of thunder, and he loves to. I can't remember what they're called. They're trolls or whatever. He loves to destroy them, and he's got this hammer, Mjolnir, which incidentally came about because of some hijinks that Loki had done in the past that resulted in Thor getting Mjolnir. And so this hammer is he can throw it and it will destroy whatever he throws it at, and then it will come right back to him. So it's this awesome tool for the gods. They are all grateful that they have it. Thor is the wielder of it. And one day, Loki comes and opens Thor's window while Thor is asleep. Now, Thor always keeps Mjolnir on his bed with him. But Loki plays this trick, opens the window, and then the frost giant comes in and steals Mjolnir, brings it to his realm. And so when Thor wakes up, he's distraught. Oh no, what happened to Mjolnir? Because Thor is very, very powerful and very strong, but without Mjolnir, he's not nearly as powerful. So this is a big problem. He needs Mjolnir. And he knows, he's certain right away, well, Loki must have had something to do with this, because Loki's always causing problems. And Loki, what'd you do? I'm like, what are you talking about? I didn't do anything. I'm totally innocent. And he says, but don't you worry, I'll find out. I'll find out what happened. I'll take care of it. So he goes and then he comes back and says, well, so here's the deal. Frost Giant has Mjolnir. And the only way that the Frost Giant will give it back is if he can marry Freya. Freya is one of the goddesses. And this is unthinkable. Absolutely unthinkable. So now they're sort of in a pickle. Don't know what to do. And Loki says, well, he says, leave it to me. He says, I've got a great plan. Here's what we're going to do. He says, Thor, you and me are going to go to the Frost Giant's realm, and you're going to pretend to be Freya, and you're going to marry him. And then he's going to give us Mjolnir, and then you can destroy them all. And this is just, this is humiliating, because Thor is going to now have to dress as a woman and go to the realm of the Frost Giant and marry the Frost Giant. And this is just humiliating to him. So, and Loki says, and by the way, I don't think you should talk at all. He says, that's not, if you're talking, it's just you're going to give it away. So let me do all the talking for you. I'll go with you. So they go down to the frost giant's realm. Thor is dressed up as Freya, and in some accounts, he actually shaves his beard. And so they go and they're having a feast with the frost giant, and the frost giant keeps saying, "Wait, I just didn't. Freya just seems different than I thought." And Loki just keeps explaining everything away. So, well, because the frost giant says, I didn't think that Freya would eat so much, because Thor has a reputation for eating tremendous amounts of food. And Loki says, well, actually, Freya was so anxious about your pending marriage, so excited for the weeks leading up to this, that she could hardly eat at all. And now that she's here, she's just really hungry. So it's just constantly explaining things like this. So finally, they get through all of it. They have the marriage, and then the frost giant gives Mjolnir back, and then Thor reveals himself and destroys all of the whatever, and that's the end of the story. So why on earth am I telling you this story? Because Loki is representing this quality in us that we have this authentic desire, but we wouldn't possibly take the steps necessary to actually manifest that in our lives, because it requires things that we wouldn't be willing to do within the context of the story, within the context of who we think we are. We think, oh, I'm Thor, I'm this hyper masculine person. I couldn't possibly dress up as a woman and marry the frost giant. That would be just the ultimate humiliation. No way. But Loki is representing that, the trickster, that the fool, that which actually isn't bound by those rules, and that in a sense knows better, isn't satisfied with the rules as they are, so is going to inject this newness and is going to bring about the change. So this is what I'm proposing is happening for us, is that when we are distraught by the things that are happening in our lives, we think, oh, this is a big problem. Can't believe this is happening. Why on earth would this be? Thought I had worked so hard to get everything the way that it should be, the way that I want it to be, the way that I thought would be the answer. And turns out it's not working out at all. It's all going badly, and I feel so distraught and disappointed. And what I'm saying is, actually, the fool within us, that which is not bound by the rules of our story, is working not against us, but working to, in a sense, dismantle the limitations that were keeping us from expressing that authentic desire as purely as possible. So then what value I perceive that this has for us is that it is a reminder, and we can just see how it's been true in our lives, how it is that there have been things in our lives that we thought that would be this is terrible. I can't believe this is happening. Can't believe that my lover is leaving me. I've lost all this money. My health is bad. Whatever. I can't believe this is happening. This is the worst. This is not at all good. But we've had these experiences that we can see where what seemed to be the worst thing actually resulted in something that was far greater than we could have imagined. But it didn't turn, it doesn't look the way that we imagined it would look, because it usually looks like humility, patience, faith, things that we didn't actually value at an earlier time in our lives because we thought that we needed to have more control. We thought that was the ways. I just need to have more control. If I can have more control and more understanding and ultimate knowledge, if I can be like God, then I'll have it all locked down and that's going to be good. But time and time again, what is revealed, at least to me, is that's not what I wanted. I didn't want any of that stuff. I wanted it to be like this. This is so much better than I could have imagined. But then simultaneous to that, there's the new journey that's starting. It's always the new journey. So it's always kicking off because there's always the limitations that are still here, the conditioning that is resisting the purity of the authentic desire. So then I have a choice in this moment. This is what's clear to me. I can either continue to lie to myself and say, oh yeah, I'm in charge and I just need more control. If I can just get more control, then everything's going to be okay. And everything that's happening is a problem. Or I can be honest, which is, well, actually, this is far greater than I had ever imagined it could be. Even though I have all of these complaints and all of these seeming problems, all this apparent hardship, the real truth is this is far, far greater than I ever could have imagined. And so maybe, and in fact, not maybe, but almost certainly, my vision based on my current conditioning is just not a reliable guide. And what is a reliable guide is actually the Fool. Now it has but it's not either or. It's actually both. And that's I think important, because if we want to look at it in these black and white terms, then at least in my experience, that turns out to be a mistake. Because if I just say, oh yeah, okay, now I know the answer is the Fool. Well, no, not quite, because then what happens is I'm if I try to live as the Fool in this story, then that's too much, actually. Because that's just chaos, and it actually isn't tempered with respect for the story. Then it's just like combative. Oh, the story's all bad, and let's just destroy it all. But I find that it's both. It's like that marriage of both, because then there's a remembrance of and a respect for the value of the Fool, and there's a respect for, within this story, it's just not kind to just go tearing down everything all the time. That also, I also do value having it's like this, it's all gray. It's not black or white, it's gray. It's this marriage. And so that's why I've been thinking about myth. It's because I really feel like it offers us this map, and it can help to remind us of how it can help to remind us to have humility, or at least remind me to have humility, that I haven't got it all figured out. I don't need to have it all figured out. and that everything that's happening is absolutely perfect. So that's my spiel for today. And now, if anybody will open it up, if anybody has anything they'd like to share, and the usual caveat, I should always say, if you do speak, it will be in the recording. The recording will be up on YouTube.
Hi, Joey.
Hi.
Here I am. My name is Victor. It says
Hi.
it on my screen.
Yep.
How are you?
Good.
I participated in a class of yours on Saturday.
Yep.
As you remember. And so I took some notes, and I went out and did some homework.
Oh, cool.
Oh, and what you wanted from us is some kind of action based on this wholeness. So to step out of the known and into the known. I mean the unknown. Pardon me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it took some time for me to figure out what that means. There's the simple way of interpreting it, and then there's the continuous interpretation of it, which continues over the next 48 hours or so, and then it manifests itself into different things and points in your life. So after the meeting, I went on a walk into town, and we have a nice little town. It's like a Springfield in The Simpsons, and it was nice and sunny out. It was very jovial. At the community center, there was some basketball and hip hop basketball, and I was like, wow, this is great. The world is just full of creativity, and you can just be a part of it in no time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to Dunkin' Donuts, and I really wanted this jelly donut. I was thinking about this jelly donut from the beginning of the day. Said, all right, after the course, I'm gonna go out and get a jelly donut. And so when I got there, my mind said, oh, wait a minute. For $2, you can get a Dunkin' Donuts a latte, medium latte for $2 special, or Americano. And I got the Americano. And I'm like, I sat down with the coffee, and I felt so at peace, but I felt but my mind was still like, oh man, why didn't you get the donut, man? It was all about the donut. And so I was sitting there like, all right, buy a donut. You're here, get the donut. You're staring at the donuts. So I'm like, no, I already spent my $2.
Mm-hmm.
And it's gonna ruin my dinner. I want a nice, wholesome dinner. And so I had a lot of trouble finding any value in the drink. I said, all right, the drink is kind of too hot to drink. But so I'm just enjoying what's happening around me. I'm trying to ignore this whole situation, these circumstances that are happening.
Mm.
So here, this call to action is happening in me. I'm thinking about it. I'm like, where is this, call to action actually? Is it happening? And so I go rollerblading, and then the next day happens. I go to church. Everything is sort of just happening the way I imagined it to happen. I watch football. I play fantasy football. I get all into it. I'm into it, and then I'm bored, and then I'm back into it. Oh, and so I went to bed, and I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning from a dream. I was at a party with my friend. I used to go to parties with my friend. His name was Sebastian. He was my best friend. But he wanted to do some drugs. And I'm like, all right, let me get a little bit. Let me join you. I'm not really sure I wanted to, but I wanted to join him. I didn't want him to do it by himself, even though he does it by himself anyway. So I'm feeling the party, the music, but there was this sense of anxiety, like, oh man, these drugs are destroying me. It's not healthy. It's not good for you. I don't feel happy about it. And this is actually just this is just a dream, but it's so real. This actually did happen in my life a lot of times. So I woke up, and I sort of had like I felt compassion actually. It was strange. I felt compassion because I felt like I've been rejecting the past. So I imagined a girl as a shadow figure, a girl sitting in a room. She's a shadow, and she really just wanted to be in the light and to play with me. So this, like, I imagined to be the part of me that I rejected. It said all the mistakes that you've ever made were actually these emotions, and I've rejected those emotions. So I said, no, they're bad. They're not good for you. And so I felt like there was a part of myself that was finally I could finally forgive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went downstairs, and I saw my brother sitting there, and he's usually up in the middle of the night, and I don't really talk to him much, and he doesn't really talk to anybody. So I said, all right, I want to say something to him. I don't know what it is, but I should say it. And I said, Alphonse, let me ask you a question, a weird question. And he said, okay. And I said, do you remember to love yourself? And he was kind of confused, which I expected. His eyes were darting around. Oh no, he's putting me on the spot. And he said, yeah. And the answer didn't really matter as much as him seeing that, I care. And so I'm glad that I care, and it makes me happy. It gives me hope that I care. I care about my friend from the past. I care about my brother, and I care about uh, uh, the mistakes that I've made in life as a part of me. And so it took about a day or so for me to finally integrate all this. And when it was integrated, there I was myself as a whole, not as thoughts, not as emotions, not as a physical being, but just whole. And so I felt it's okay to have these feelings that you've made a mistake or you've had anxiety, because that's part of you, and it's a creative process that occurs when there's change. And yeah, that's the whole story.
That's awesome. It's really awesome. I wasn't sure where it was going, but it's an awesome story.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad I could share it with everyone. I hope everyone liked the story. I hope that they're encouraged to share their story too. It was hard for me in the beginning to talk about myself on Zoom. I wasn't used to the application, and I don't really like talking about my own life unless it's a specific event. Actually, I can talk about, rather than a list of problems that I know are going to fix itself when the right moment comes.
Yeah. And it sounds like the what I hear in your story is that the right moment is always here, and it's it, your willingness to actually show up in it with that. I guess we could call it the intention. You heard the invitation to to kind of show up in your life with this intention or kind of awareness, just curiosity. Well, what is that call to action? And then that allowed you to actually be present to the moment, and something new happened. Something new rose up, and rather than rejecting it, you were open to it, and that's really beautiful. And I mean, it's just what a beautiful story. It's just think you're going to get a jelly donut, and just to be present to all of your conditioning, the like, oh, the rejection of it, I did the wrong thing, and then the arguing about it. It's just like the same thing just showing up, but it shows up in one way, and then when you can receive that, it shows up in another way, and then when you receive that, it shows up in another way, because you quite possibly to receive it through the anxiety over the jelly donut was was an easier way in. But when you're willing to receive that, then it shows up in the dream. And when you're willing to receive that, then it shows up with your brother. So each step is just beautiful. That's really it. That's what I'm hoping for, is that we can just start to recognize, rather than rejecting what's happening, rejecting our story, or rejecting that within us which is calling for something new, calling for a deeper discovery or an expression of this authentic desire, if we can just keep trusting in that and just keep saying yes to it as it's showing up, then it takes care of itself. It unfolds, and that authentic desire manifests in ways that we couldn't have really anticipated, couldn't have seen how that would lead to that. Who could have guessed?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Joey.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out the right words, and like I'm very thankful uh, that you're out there and you're helping people. I'm also thankful that life offers healing after all, and even when you think that it doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's the case a lot. Is you feel that hope doesn't actually exist because the circumstances are too great. And so I'm trying to figure out how this fits into your analogy of the pool. So when I think about a pool, I think about an actual pool that you swim in.
Mm-hmm.
Is that close to what you're talking about?
What was the analogy? I don't remember an analogy about a pool.
Oh, you're talking about the tarot cards, the 21 cards in the pool. The pool is actually not a swimming pool, is it?
No, but it's a fool. It's a
Oh, the
fool.
fool. Oh, the tarot card of the fool.
The fool. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was trying to figure out whether you're saying the
Could
fool
be a
or the pool.
could be a pool though.
What's that?
It could be a pool.
It could be a pool.
You heard it that way.
Oh, actually, I was first I heard the fool, so I was imagining the tarot card of the fool,
Yeah.
which can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. So yeah, in a way, we are kind of like a fool, and so when we don't want to be that fool because we want to be the smart person who's got it figured out, and so that that anxiety doesn't exist anymore in that realm of knowing. But when you don't know, then you don't know, and then so you're scared, and that's really scary, not knowing.
Yeah, that's right. But that's exactly the point. Is that when we when our sense of okayness is dependent upon us knowing, then we're not going to be okay, because the truth is we don't know. We don't have that. So it takes real courage to be willing to admit that we don't know. And to be willing, because I think we've all had those moments so many times in our lives, just like what you're describing, where you come downstairs and there's your brother. And maybe it's not always our brother. Sometimes it's our sister. Sometimes it's our mother. Sometimes it's our father. Sometimes it's our husband or our wife or our friend or our neighbor, our child, where we feel this call to intimacy and vulnerability, to just be willing to drop the armor and just to be the fool, to just be honest, to to whatever that is, to express that I love you, I'm sorry, I'm afraid. And it's hard. Just such a simple thing is sometimes the hardest thing. And we then can build up our world to try to avoid that, paint the other person as the enemy or the one who is in the wrong. They are the reason for this. If only they would do it differently, then I could do it differently. If only they made it easier. If only life made it easier. If only I was stronger, smarter, if I knew more, if I had all of these talents and skills, if I could love myself more, then this would be easier. Then I could say I love you. Then I could be vulnerable. It's the hardest thing sometimes. And it's the most, it's why life is rich. Without that, we wouldn't have anything. Without that, it would just be jelly donuts. It really would be, it would just be, you'd just be eating jelly donuts all the time, and you'd just be thinking, well, boy, this should be good because it's a jelly donut, but after a while, it's just nauseating. We want actually, see, that's the thing is, that's what I'm saying. The authentic desire is not for the jelly donut. We get, at first, that's the thing that, it's like the carrot that is dangling in front of our face, moves us along. So, ooh, jelly donut. Gets us moving. In any relationship, right? Any relationship, there's, you meet somebody and initially you think, ooh, I like this person. And then you get to know the person a little bit more, and then there are those points you say, oh, don't like this person at all. You had to get lured in by the carrot. But it's revealing to you what's deeper, because what's deeper is that vulnerability and the intimacy. And that's what makes it, for me, that's what makes life rich. If it was all easy, who wants that really? We think we want that, but we don't really want that. And that's what I was saying with the story. But we think, because the first time Loki confused me. I mean, Loki still confuses me, but Loki confused me for a long time. I'm like, what is this Loki? Why do they have Loki around? He's just causing problems. He is always causing problems. But it's like the rest of our lives, we're just always experiencing these problems. And if we were serious about not wanting any problems, we would do things differently. But I'm convinced that we want the problems, not because we want problems per se, but because we're dissatisfied with the status quo, because the status quo is to be armored and to pretend to be God, to pretend that I know everything, I'm the master of everything, I got it all under control, all figured out, I'm in charge. And we don't actually want that. We're not satisfied by that at all. So we just keep stepping in it, because that's the way. You venture forth, you step in it, and then you let it do its thing, and it leads you in ways that you would not have anticipated. is you think you're going for a jelly donut, and actually you find out, no, that wasn't it at all. So I love the story. Like I said, I had no idea where that was going, but I love the story, so thank you. Hi, yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
most of the time this happens to me almost every day, every week.
Every moment.
Where everything it seems ordinary, but it's not. Something's happening, and you don't know what's actually happening,
Yeah.
uh, uh, or why it's happening. And so you ask yourself, where is this leading me?
Yeah. Well,
And
you'll never figure that out.
yeah,
Yeah.
uh,
You'll just find out when you find out.
also, I used to like to watch a lot of movies when I was younger,
Hmm.
like that. Um, I also, like, for your example of the Loki character, I had a Loki character. His name was Sebastian. And I known him since sixth grade, and he was always a troublemaker, and he went out of his way not to follow the rules.
Yeah.
And ever since like second grade, I was the perfect young boy, perfectly behaved. Well, in
Well, just
school,
ask your mom if that's true.
in school,
Yeah.
in school. We're
Yeah.
talking about in school.
Okay.
At home, the rules sort of change
Hmm.
because you're playing games, you're playing video games, and if you don't win, then it's time to go wild. I get it. I used to get so angry from playing these video games. I would get so involved, and so, like, somehow I developed this intensity to win, and it became so important to win.
Hmm.
You were talking about this last week, was with the need to win all the time, and video games is probably the worst case scenario for someone to be in if they have that kind of conditioning. Of course,
Best case, 'cause it helps you to discover. Just helps you to discover what exactly, like, everything is. I'm telling you, everything is exactly perfect.
yeah.
Really is. So the video games, it- not that not that I'm a fan of video games, mind you, uh, but for those who are playing video games, I gotta assume it's exactly perfect. It offers exactly what's
I used to play
needed.
the games in the Super Nintendo. That was actually a very good console. Um, then there was the N64,
Yeah,
and
Victor, I really I appreciate you so much, and there's somebody else who wanted to share something. So I'm just wondering, is this
oh,
something?
okay, no,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Okay.
You
Thank
got
you.
it.
Thank you, Victor. Hi.
Hey, hi. Um, I guess I wanted to share that Victor's story really touched me, especially like you. I kind of didn't know where it was going, and then I was like, wow, that was amazing. Um, I was really touched about the part where you were, I think it was a dream where you were experiencing, a part of yourself that was getting in trouble or doing things you weren't supposed to do, and then experiencing self-forgiveness. Am I right about that, Victor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Mm-hmm.
the forgiveness happened when I woke up, and so that's what I discovered as to be the light that shines on you or anybody that has made mistakes
Yeah.
and told that part of yourself that that part is bad, or you're a bad person because of that. And
Yeah.
so then there's a part of you that is feeling sad, and yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so that came up. What came up for me when you were telling that story was I felt super sad, and I still do. And what Joey talked about today about the Fool really rings home too, because I was about 8 years ago, that aspect of me kind of woke up. I was seeing a psychologist and doing a lot of, I don't know, maybe shadow work, depth work, and I started experiencing all these aspects of myself, including, I guess, what you would call soul. And it all took me by great surprise. But the Fool, love, I guess, in the purest form, I don't know how you would say it, but that came alive and it just wreaked havoc in my life. And I made a lot of mistakes. And I really, yeah, so self-forgiveness. And then is something I guess I'm hoping for. And also that aspect, that outlaw, it was like a wild child in me. And it was beautiful, and it is beautiful. And she was so creative and just willing to be the Fool, willing to be humble and humiliated by love. And I made a bit of a mess of my life. And so now it's just kind of, I don't know if that aspect is buried back down and like the adult is here. So it does kind of feel either or, it's like those two aspects haven't integrated or something. And so Joey, I just wanted to, because you spoke about that and you spoke about it's not either or, just how that looks for you,
Mhm.
or what, I don't know what.
Well,
I don't think it's a how-to question, because it seems like life sort of unfolds and you can't just say, well, this is what you do and how you integrate. But I'm just curious how, I don't know, what you have to say about that.
well, as I said, the Fool is really is outside of the context of the story. So
Yeah.
it's not bound by that. And it's also a presence in the story. So the idea that there is it's either or, well, so you could just inquire right now and just notice that so it manifests in a particular way in your life that had for you positive and negative qualities to it. But apart from that, if you attach the way in which it manifests, the way you experienced it to that itself, then you can say, oh, it's either here or not. But just forget about that for a moment. Isn't this purity of love here now?
Definitely.
Right.
Yes.
So the way in which we experience it within the story changes. But it's always present. And what I'm suggesting is just that it's very natural, and that's why I think that the exploring the hero's journey, and also for that same workshop series, I'm considering doing another track of videos that will explore the major arcana, just because I think it's it's just useful just to see how this is playing out. It's there. It plays out in the story through this cycle. So there are times when things seem to be more falling apart, and there are times when things seem to be building back up. And so there's the beginning of the story. It's a cycle. It's not, the beginning is not the beginning. The beginning is just a phase of this cycle that repeats over and over and over. So we go through this journey, and there's this, in a sense, we go to the underworld, we go to the unknown. We make this shift from this sense of being the what we could say, the outer to the inner. So from trying to construct everything to have this projection, this image that can be acceptable and glorified, to this point where there's a kind of a breakdown, and we realize, oh, okay, it's not going to be like that. It's going to be different. There's a shift to the inner. And then there's that's where we discover that light within. And then we come back to, we return to the world being, at that moment, an awareness of the wholeness and the unity of inner and outer. There is no distinction. But then we come back to the beginning, and the beginning is the construction of, in a sense, this new ego, a more expansive ego that is going to express and function in this world. And so in that stage, we're going to be constructing there's a lot of structure. There's the sense of having self-power, will. There's a sense of having knowledge. There's a sense of having authority. There's a sense of, having a structure for all of it. So and then the vehicle that we imagine, okay, now I've got it all figured out. I'm going forth. And then we go around again. And so if we think that we're gonna not, if we think that's not gonna happen, then from my experience, we suffer unnecessarily, because then we think, finally arrived. But who is it that's arrived? That's, if we're claiming that someone's arrived, that's delusion. Because then we think, I as the separate ego character have arrived somewhere, and now I'm God. And that's just a recipe for disaster. But what I'm proposing is that we can really just tell the truth and notice that this has always been going on for our whole lives. We can just look back and see it's always been happening over and over and over and over and over. That because we at any point we think, this is, now, well, it depends where we are, but we could either think, okay, that now I know everything, got it all figured out, and so then we negate everything that came before, because I was a fool then, but now I know, now I've got it all figured out. Or we can, the inversion of that is, this is the ultimate catastrophe, this is the end, there's no hope whatsoever. So from my perspective, in the Buddhist, from the way the Buddhists describe the wheel of suffering, that would be the wheel of suffering, that we're just, we're inflated, deflated, inflated, deflated, inflated, deflated, and we're just on this, which is driven by ego desire. If we're just fixated on ego desire, just trying to get for me and mine, then that just spins round and round and round. But if we can discover that which is not bound by any wheel of any kind, that which is never spinning round, that which is just here always. So this love in its pure, unmanifest nature isn't, you don't get more of it or lose it. It's just always here. But within the story is still going. The story is cycling. The story is doing its thing. Character is evolving and growing and developing. And I mean, maybe there are people who, and I'm open to that. I think it's possible. Maybe there are people who reach a state in which somehow, and I don't know how that would be, but somehow they still are appearing in the story, but they're no longer, there is no further evolution because they've just ultimately evolved, possibly. But I don't think that's common if it ever happens. And so the people who want to claim that I'd say for the most part, I'm very suspicious of anybody who claims that for themselves. That doesn't sound like the sort of thing that the person who's actually there would actually be claiming or needing to claim, because who would need to claim that? So when people are claiming that for themselves, that's very suspicious to me. And I would personally not, I would steer clear of people who are claiming that for themselves, claiming that they're ultimately enlightened and free of ego, and that doesn't seems a little off to me. So for the vast majority of us, I think it's very wise just to recognize that this character is continuing to evolve and grow. I mean, that's what maturation is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And rather than, I've just found that seeing it from, that there's this balance between maintaining this awareness of that which is already whole, already complete, is not in and of itself. It's already infinite and boundless. So what's going to grow here? Nothing. There's no growth because it's nothing. There's no thing to be growing. So we can have awareness of that. That's not, I don't think that's particularly difficult. I mean, I think we tend to imagine that it's difficult, but in reality, which I think because you have had enough experience now to recognize that in any moment you can just pause and notice that in direct experience, the actuality of what's here it's simultaneously empty and full. There's nothing to grasp. But then then to not deny that this life is still happening, this story is still occurring.
Yeah.
Because you still story. You still have, apparently you have your life. Things, it's like it's still, you still have a desire actually for that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because we could choose not to.
Yeah.
Maybe, right? We could just choose to sever all connection with the story. But there's some desire within us not to. We have a desire to keep showing up, to keep responding when our kids call for our attention. And I think we can also trust that. But then it's the balance between these two, because we know what it's like to just to lose sight of unbound wholeness and be totally immersed in the delusion of I'm all alone in this life and I got to figure it out. And that's going to be the
extreme, or the other extreme, yeah, disregarding the story and the person, and
Yeah.
neither
Which-
of them work out so well.
Right. And again, I mean, it's possible that for some people there is a complete severing, and I don't have a judgment that that's bad or wrong. I mean, that if that happens, that's what happens. But I don't believe that that's when the majority of people who claim that that's true for them. I don't believe it. That everything about the way they behave and what's happening just indicates otherwise. Indicates a large effort being made trying to create a story of anybody who has to claim I'm not like never born, never died and stuff like that. I mean, who needs that? Only person who would need that would be the ego in the story who's trying to convince themselves and others of how enlightened they are.
I like how you say a lot of times what people are really wanting when they say they want enlightenment is death. Because in a sense, yeah.
Right. And I would say that in some sense, anybody who would, if there was a let's say an end to or a severing of that, then I would say that the authentic realization of that would not actually be death. That would be total fullness, because then there's just, I mean, that's ultimate radical acceptance, because there's then the perception that there's nothing whatsoever that is other than absolutely perfect. Whatever is appearing is already absolutely perfect. So for the rest of us, to whatever degree we don't perceive that, I guess that's really what I'm saying, is that that's the beauty of the story, is that the story is offering us that wherever it is that we're perceiving that there is not already absolute wholeness and perfection, that's where we are journeying to discover that. And that's why that is that's the expansion. So the expansion happens through the destruction or dissolution of the boundaries, right? If we have a sense of this is life, it exists in these boundaries with these rules, and we are suffering from that, then the authentic desire, which is being made manifest through our life, is helping us to see that, oh, that was an artificial construct. That's not actually true. What's actually true is that this is already whole, perfect, and complete.
So I think what arose when Victor was telling his story was an authentic desire for self-forgiveness myself.
Say that again. I didn't hear the last word.
Yeah, what was arising in me when Victor was telling his story, I believe, was an authentic desire for self-forgiveness.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And I don't really think I know exactly what that is, but that's how the story rolls right now. So.
Yeah. Well, right. I mean, that for me, see if I can express this. So for me, that revelation is always sort of like Dorothy at the end of The Wizard of Oz. You know, it's like, oh, and you were there, and you were there, and you were there. So it is. So when I have this authentic desire for self-forgiveness starts to become clear, and then I'm wondering, okay, but how? Because again, it's met with resistance from the conditioning, because the present conditioning is like, wait a second, I don't know how that's possible, because self-forgiveness would look like something entirely different. It would feel very different. It would basically mean that I all the things that I think that I did wrong, I'd have to somehow get rid of them. That's, I mean, I'm not saying that's true for you, but that's my conditioning is, wait a second, there's no possibility of self-forgiveness because it would be impossible. I'd have to do something that I can't do. I don't have the power to do that. And so then the discovery that takes place through this journey is, there's the shift from the outer to the inner. So the outer is all about the circumstances and the conditioning, the trauma, the opinions, the judgments, all this stuff about what happened, the appearance. And then the shift, there's this, at a certain point, there's this recognition, okay, I've been fighting, struggling, trying to get it right, trying to figure it out, going, I'm going to solve this. And then it's just, oh, shit. I'm not going to do that. It's not going to happen. I can't win that. Yeah. I don't have that power. So in the major arcana, that card is the Wheel of Fortune. And you see that at the midpoint of any story. I mean, if you were to take a screenwriting course, almost certainly it would tell you there is a midpoint, and the midpoint is that's that kind of shift where there's something happens that it was out of the hands of the protagonist. And that's what reveals this, that's the shift in which we realize the real authenticity in a deeper way. That we had our attention on all this superficial stuff. And it's that point where we get kind of broken down, where we just, I can't do it. I don't have whatever it takes. I don't have whatever I thought I needed to win at this. So then, but then we're still here. You know, we weren't offed, because that wouldn't be a very good story if at the middle of the story the protagonist is offed. So we're still here. So then from that point onward, it's this discovery of, okay, what is this really then? Because it's not what I thought it was. And so for me, it's always been, it's just a very humbling point. You know, it's just very, very humbling. And it's like a great unburdening. There's still more of the journey. It's not like that's the end of it. But okay, all this crap I was lugging around thinking that was going to be it. For me, there was this awesome point in my life. I'd been living out of a cargo van, and I had all of my remaining possessions were in that van, and I had it parked and had gone away for a few days. And when I came back, I arrived, and it was in the night. It was dark. And I saw something seems a little off here, and I went up closer to it, and wow, looks like a bomb went off. Somebody had torched my van. They'd broken into it, and it was burned from the inside out. It was like they just destroyed it. So everything that I had was burned. It's gone. So I experienced in that moment this tremendous relief. Not in an entirely positive way, but it was like, oh, okay. At least I don't have to deal with that anymore. That whole life, it's like there are many points of no return, but that's a point of no return. That's, you know, that you're not, you know, you can't, there's just no possibility of undoing that. So that's been my experience, is that the revelation of self forgiveness and self love is there is a point in which it just becomes clear. And this is, like, again, it's a cycle. It's just constantly, there's deeper and deeper revelation, but there's always that point of, okay, whatever I thought this was, it's clear that it's not that. So now I don't have to, at least I don't have to try and do that anymore. And then here I'm just left with, I'm actually just now left with myself, not with all of the way that I was, not like the projections now have the image, the self image is gone. Nobody's going to believe it anymore. I can't believe it. Nobody else is going to believe it. So it's like I'm exposed. I'm naked. Now I get to find out really what is actual self-forgiveness, what is actual self-love, because now I'm just left with myself, not with my ideas of myself. And then, okay, I guess I don't have to try and find self-forgiveness for all of those things, because that's not really it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, everybody. Anybody else? Hour and a half, so we could go a little bit longer before it's time for lunch. Otherwise, it can be time for lunch.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
Is a lot about what you talked about at the beginning, because I didn't quite follow it all. I know I had a couple phone calls. Is that coming from your myth class? I guess I haven't experienced quite a class like this on a Tuesday. It's more like kind of personal problems, and but maybe this is really, from what I've heard, beyond that, really something beyond that. But I'm wondering, I suppose it would be really helpful to take that class to understand more of what you're saying.
I mean, if you're called to do it. If not, then no. But yeah, that workshop is focused on this kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks, Joy.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.